Hi everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video I want to talk about Phrack because recently in the 19th of August 2024 a new issue of Phrack, specifically issue number 71, was released, so now you can go and read it. Now, what exactly is Phrack for those who don't know about it? Essentially, it's an online magazine, also known as e-zine, that contains some of the most influential writing in agriculture. So essentially, Phrack contains topics. You will find a lot of topics regarding computer science, more specifically computer security, and more generally, the general topic is ways of thinking about the world using the hacker mentality. So even in contexts that are not strictly related to computer science and computer security, it's just about how do you deal with the world, how do you use what is given to you in the best way possible to obtain exactly what you want. Now, the new issue number 71, as I said, can be read at the following link. So https www.phrack.org/issues/71/1.html. And this is the Phrack website where you can see all the different issues. So you click into issues and notice that here we have the 71 issues. This site is very minimal and simplistic, which I love. So this is the 71 issue. The latest one, as I said, was released in 19 August 2024. The first issue instead was released in 1985, 17 of November. So that's the idea, like Phrack goes back a lot and a lot of historical paper were published here. For example, one of the many historical essay writings article that was published on Phrack was Smashing the Stack for Fun and Profit. So this one, which was released in 1996 on the issue 49. And this was written by Aleph 1. And in this article, essentially, Aleph 1 described in a formalized way, so it was one of the first formalization of stack smashing attacks. So buffer overflow that go into the stack area of a program and they use the overflow to hijack the execution flow of the program. So that's a general idea. And in this paper, it describes the main idea, how the stack works, how the stack is used for control flow reasons, and how you can abuse that when you have a buffer overflow in the stack memory area. So this is like a small example of the influence of Phrack. There are many other different articles like this that introduce new techniques, new ways of doing things, new attacks, and so on and so forth. So lately the new release was out, 71, and I just suggest you to go and check it out, read it. There are 17 articles. The first one are written by the Phrack staff, and then the other are written by single contributors. I've read a bunch of them, not all of them, and essentially the idea is that all of them are interesting. Just go and check them out. All of them are interesting. In this video, I want to read the introduction because it's really important to think about the topics that are covered in this introduction. So, the introduction is called Breaking the Spell. It can feel like the world is in a dreamlike state, a hype-driven delirium fueled by venture capitalists and the promises of untold riches and influence. Everyone seems to be rushing to implement the latest thing, hoping to find a magic bullet to solve problems that they may not have or even understand. Now this is really important because it talks about hype, and in the last few years, especially with the advent of large language models, AI, and also before that even blockchain and crypto values, there has been a lot of hype injected into the computer science industry and also the computer security industry, because of course when something happens in the computer science, in the technological industry more general, it also affects the computer security industry, for example with AI. Now, while hype has always been a thing, in the past few years, 2020-2024, we have witnessed several large pushes to integrate untested, underdeveloped, and unsustainable technology into systems that were already going through it. This is an important point because, of course, hype has always been a thing, but lately the hype has been rising, and this brings like negative consequences. For example, the push to use systems that are untested, underdeveloped, and unsustainable. This is important because technology now, it seems like it's developed through a dreamlike state. Like, I really like the word dreamlike state because venture capitalists, of course, have a lot of money. They can invest into startups. They can influence the tech that is being developed for the next few years. And sometimes, most of the time, I would say, venture capitalists do not understand, like, technologically what they are doing or what they are investing on. So the idea is that here I come, startup, I go and sell a dream based on problems that people might not even have. And this creates a lot of hype, a lot of money going around. So the more money goes around, the more hype it creates. And this is like a very poisonous cycle. So it's really hard. Now, once the charm wears off and all the problems did not just magically disappear, they drop these ideas and move on to the next at the cost of everyone else. So of course, since this is driven by hype, it needs a lot of reassurance, a lot of like just macro management, I would say. And when they understand, like, okay, maybe this is not it, you either scrap the idea and go to the next, because the next idea is untested, so it could potentially be the one. But this searching for like a better solution is not really done in a sustainable way. It's not really done through critical thinking and understanding of what technology is capable of. It's mostly done through emotion, through unregulated emotion. And once again, we come back to the dreamlike state, hype-driven delirium, which are really like well-chosen words. Many of these new and exciting ideas involve introducing increasingly opaque abstraction layers. They promise to push us towards the future, yet only brings us further from understanding our own abilities and needs. It's easy to sell ideas like this. Once again, really important point to mention is that something that all these new technologies, all these new promises have in common is that they bring out extremely complex abstraction layers that are really hard to understand. Since they are hard to understand, it's really hard to understand if they are valid or not. This creates a confusion, and this confusion is the perfect soil, is the perfect foundation for like creating stuff that is not really sustainable or that doesn't really make sense. So that's the idea. And also, the more abstraction layers we add on our technologies, and the further we are from understanding them, which also means that we will be further from understanding our own abilities, because I cannot really understand my ability when I do not understand the technology I'm dealing with. And if I create even more complex and abstract technology without a real need for it. So here is the problem. Abstraction are good when I need them, when I can use them, when they make sense, but abstraction can also be used, or should I say, can also be abused just to act as an opaque layer so that people cannot criticize me, so that people don't really know how to sort of like reject my idea by argumenting it, right? Because if I say I have a new chatbot idea startup for this new product, maybe it's not that easy to like prove that your idea is not too good, because it's just too abstract, it's hard to make sense of. You can use arguments like, wait, it's too abstract, I don't understand the need and things like that, but it can, especially to non-technical people, to people who don't really know technology and computer science, all these abstractions looks like magic and they are confused by it. And so maybe they end up investing in it, they may end up talking about it, and so on and so forth. And this is why essentially it says it's easy to sell ideas like this, because you are completely detached from reality. You can sell any dream you want, and when you sell dream, people are emotional and they want dream, they buy dreams. What isn't easy is creating something both practical and sustainable. If we want to make the world more sustainable, we need to understand the inputs, outputs, dependencies, constraints, and implementation details of the systems we rely on. So this is not easy. What is not easy is to create something that is meaningful, that works, that is sustainable, and that is based on actual real technology and how technology works. And of course, if we want to improve the world, first we need to understand it. We need to understand all the thousands or hundreds of thousands of systems we rely on, and we need to like understand this system based on their inputs, outputs, dependencies, constraints, and implementation details. Now, of course, this is like a heavy computer science point of view of stuff. I believe that not all things can be just understood in terms of these ideas. However, most things can, like most things can. Whenever we make it more difficult to know something, we inch closer to an information dark age. So that's the idea. Sometimes things are complex. Like if I want to explain a very complex heap overflow attack, it's like that thing is just complex. I cannot make it easier. However, sometimes we take easy stuff, we take simple ideas and we gatekeep them. We make them more complex just so that we can benefit from them as much as possible. And this is not good because ultimately it makes the knowledge itself more weak. It protects less the knowledge. After the past several decades of humanity putting all of its collective knowledge online, we are seeing more ways to prevent us from accessing it. Not only is good information harder to find, bad information is drowning it out. So this is like a real problem of the internet. Because initially the internet was told to be like, look, it's a place where you can put ideas, where you can share stuff, and intuitively, like naively, it seems like a very good idea, and it is a very good idea. The problem, however, is that nowadays with the internet we have an incredible amount of worthless information. So if we think about the growth of humanity in history, throughout all the initial years, before the internet essentially, the information were really scarce, like you just did not have a lot of information. The information was very few, and the few information you had was typically of high quality, or anyways like worth to take a look at. Nowadays we have an opposite problem. We don't have a scarcity of information, we have a lot of information. The problem, however, is that of this lot of information, most of it, like an incredible percentage of it, is just bad information that is meaningless, that has no meaning, it's just made to waste time essentially. And so the good information is becoming less and less a percentage of the total amount of information, and this in the long term can be a problem. There are increasing incentives to gatekeep and collect rent on important resources and to disseminate junk that is useless at best and harmful at worst. In all of this chaos, the real threat is the loss of useful, verified and trusted information for the sake of monetizing the opposite. So of course, why is this the case? Why is now the amount of bad information much more than the amount of good information? And typically this has to do, I would say, with both an emotional component of humans, but also a monetarily component. Like economically, sometimes it is much more efficient to produce bad information to put chaos into the internet instead of producing useful, verified and trusted information. Because surprisingly enough, the act of like verifying information, producing useful information is not really that economically like viable. It's not really rewarding economically wise. So this is like a problem. This is a real problem. Fortunately, there are still hackers. For every smokescreen that clouds our vision, hackers help to kill the air. For every new garden wall erected, hackers forge a path around it. For every lock placed on our own ideas and cultural artifacts, hackers craft durable picks to unshackle them. Hackers try to understand what lies beyond their perspective. Hackers focus on what is real and what is here. This is an important paragraph because one of the most important things that I learned from computer science and specifically from computer security is the difference between a law of physics and a law of humans. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we are humans, we live in big, complex societies interconnected with them. And this means that sometimes we are put under rules which are not created by the world, like the laws of physics. Gravity, I cannot argue with gravity. I cannot do anything about gravity. I mean, there are some things you can do, but essentially, the fact that gravity exists and it works like Newton and then Einstein described, it's just a fact of the world. Maybe in the future we can have better models, but we already understand it pretty well. Now, when I deal with gravity, There's no one I can argue with. I just know I have to accept it and deal with it. However, when it comes to human laws, when it comes to human constructs, things becomes more messy. Because at some point I'm like, wait, this rule was imposed by another human. What were his intentions? Why did he say this way? Why am I being subjected to a constraint that was created by another human? I want to understand why. I want to go deep. I want to see if there is a real barrier or if that barrier can be crossed. I want to understand if it makes sense to cross it. What are the consequences if I should do it or not? So that's the idea. This is what I think I interpret the phrase hacker focus on what is real and what is here. We can move forward through this bullshit. We can work together to maintain good information and amplify the voices of those who are creating and curating it. We can learn how things actually work, share the details, and use this mechanism to do some good. We can devise new methods of communication and collaboration and work both within and between our communities to jam the trash compactor currently trying to crush us to death. Another very important paragraph. The thing is that we can fight all this, we can fight the hype, we can fight the misuse of technology, we can fight all of this phenomenon. How? By focusing, by paying attention, by learning how things actually work, and by sharing the details. And by using these details to do what we think is good. Of course, here good can be really hard to define, but the most important thing is that by learning how things actually work, by sharing the details, we empower people, we empower communities to do what they believe is best for the world. And I think this is the best thing we can aim for, essentially. And this is also what I'm trying to do in this channel. I'm trying to explain how things actually work. I'm trying to focus on the details and on the communication and sharing aspects. So it's sort of like, it's my little way of fighting all of this. Hacking is both a coping mechanism and a survival skill. It represents the pinnacle of our abilities as humans to figure out how to use whatever tools we may have in whatever way we can to do what we need to do. Hacking is a great equalizer, a common dialect, a spirit that exists within all of us. It has the power to shape the world into one we want to live in. The hacker spirit breaks any spell. This is like the perfect ending. The idea is that hacking is a way of seeing the world, is a way of interacting with the world and with other people. And we need to sort of like curate that. We need to develop that. We need to take care of that and protect the spirit. And make sure that the forces driven by hype, by these promises of untold riches, by this misuse of technology do not affect us in the long term. Because how? Just by focusing on how things work. I would say this is mostly the hacker spirit. Focusing on the system, how they work, letting the system change us essentially, and then use our will to change the system, like in a sort of like a feedback loop. So that's the idea. Now, in this issue of Phrack, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I've read a bunch of these, not all of them. I'm gonna read all of them later on. But essentially, like this one, Defective by Specification, is an interesting read because it talks about this file format that is used to encrypt the video files and is also used by the DRM system to protect stuff from getting out, like Netflix, Amazon, these streaming services, and so on and so forth. Well, essentially, this encryption scheme does not do authentication, and so Retroid, the author of this article, found a way essentially to get out the file, to decrypt the file without knowing the encryption key. Very interesting read. This is about applied cryptography, an attack on applied cryptography. Very interesting. This one I've not read yet, but essentially it talks about how you can bypass control flow protection using function-oriented programming. So this is interesting, but I did not read. Also, I didn't read this one. It's about SQL injection and a specific type like select-only SQL injection in Postgres SQL databases. This one is about how to build malware. So it's not about the malware itself, but all the techniques that you can use to wrap your malware so that it is not caught, so that you can rely on like the deployment and stuff like that. This one is about like an error in a browser, so pawning a browser, so very complex. This one is about reversing engineering of Dart snapshots. Now Dart is a programming language. I think it was developed by Google or used by Google. So all about reversing engineering. This one I read is about finding hidden kernel modules in the Linux kernel. So essentially in the Linux kernel, you can load external modules that act like drivers. So when you put maybe a USB stick or a device, it's gonna load a specific module during runtime. So there's all this technology of LKM, which stands for Loadable Kernel Modules. So essentially that's the idea. Now, when you develop a rootkit in the context of Linux kernels, the idea is that you develop the rootkit through an LKM, through a loadable module, but then as soon as the module is loaded, you remove the module from the metadata of the kernel so that no one knows you just loaded a module. Now, in this technique, the author shows how you can find currently active, currently loaded module in the kernel by analyzing the memory. So it's like memory forensics in a way. You just analyze a live memory of the kernel and you understand what kind of modules there are and how many there are to find the hidden ones. This other one is about a privilege escalation technique, which is very complex to be used in the Linux kernel. This one is about how to create essentially a special shell when you want to attack a system. This one is about using de-optimization to evade antivirus and EDR system. This one is about format string, so it's very short, it's very sweet. It contains some 0 days on format string attacks, where format string are a like famous and old C vulnerability, and it's really easy to spot it. So you would think that no one would have this kind of vulnerability, but in this article, it's proven the opposite. Like even products like they can end up having this kind of vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And finally, the last one is about crypto values, and it's an interesting story because it talks about economy. It talks about operating with a company in this environment, in the environment of crypto values. So like really all of these articles are extremely interesting. And then the first 4 are like written by the staff. It's like the introduction that we read, Line Noise, which contains a bunch of smaller articles written by people that are not long enough to make it their own article, but it's like they are contained in Line Noise. Also interesting. Loopback is where they read the emails of the readers of the magazine. And Phrack profile is essentially a biography. I suggest to read this biography because it's really enlightening and fun and just interesting to learn how expert people, how people who contribute to this field, just their life story, how they ended up doing what they are doing now or what they did in the past. Extremely interesting. So this is it for this video. I just wanted to make it to make sure that you know that the new release of Phrack is out. Go read it, support it, and essentially that's it. This kind of knowledge must be protected at all costs and must be shared, and we all must learn from it. So I hope the video was enjoyable. If it was so, please subscribe to the channel, support what I'm trying to do here on YouTube, and see you to the next video.